Okay, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the Amaze Fest for having me, and a big thanks to everyone who's helped me build my installation, if any of you are here. And one of the things I wanted to call out to start with is I wanted to point out that anyone in this room could end up on this stage. I didn't do anything really special to get here. I just continued to do what I loved year after year after year. And if you do that, people will flock to you. The next thing I would like to talk about and mention is I own a game studio called Dozen Eyes Games. We make applied games and museum installations. This is our most recent puzzle game. It'll be out hopefully this year, and it is called Crystallon. This is our most recent title. You can download it on the Google Play Store. We worked in conjunction with the U.S. State Department to develop a game to help political refugees adjust to their lives in the United States. Along with an incredibly talented group of women, I founded an organization called the Code Liberation Foundation. We have taught over 1,000 women in the New York City area and beyond to program games between the ages of 16 to 60. We have a high school program, and we see inclusivity as a mandate to build open source communities, and we really focus on diversity in game development. We have done a lot of classes. I thought I would highlight some of my favorite events and classes. I did a workshop on one-button games at NYC Resistor this year. Nina Freeman ran a game jam called Bossed Up that focuses on empowerment and using possibly the most amazing Nicki Minaj video possible as inspiration. We also have high school classes. You can see Nina in the picture over here, and also Kat Small taught them this year. And we worked in high school magnet science schools to bring a lot of young women into game development. We also run lady jams. We do average 2 to 3 a year. We've worked with organizations like Black Girls Code, and we have a plethora of game development classes, which you're welcome to attend if we do one anywhere near you. And we've taught everything from open frameworks to Unity to Twine to C++, Phaser. Some of the games that the women who've worked in the organization have produced are really outstanding. This is Nina Freeman's How Do You Do It, Kat Small's The 5 Stages, Jane Friedhoff's Slam City Oracles, and a personal favorite of mine that came from one of our students, Stellar Smooch. So I love this game if you haven't possibly played it. Really, it's free on the iOS. So I would like to now quickly talk to people in the room who might be educators. And as an educator myself, I want to give you some tips for how to how to include women in programming classes. The first is, so this is engaging women in programming using 3 simple, easy steps. Step 1, admit defeat and empower change. I really encourage everyone to recognize that there is a problem. Women majoring in the computer sciences in U.S. universities fell 79% between 2000 and 2011. At this point, we need to recognize that there's a bias, right? And CS courses really do cater to male interests. They cater to how code works and how to build things. And I think we need to reintroduce code as a way to create. It's a tool for telling stories and building worlds, right? I want you to look at these 2 programming classes. Number 1 is Computer Science 101 in C++, and number 2 is Creative Approaches to Problem Solving in Science and Engineering using Python. Which one of these classes would you rather take? Class B had 50% female enrollment. So also the other thing is we need to really focus on bringing an end to the programmer. This is not okay. Under no circumstances is this idea that code should be difficult and you should do code push-ups and you should be some kind of ninja badass computer scientist. That's just ridiculous. It's just, it doesn't need to be like this. Because when young women come into the field, they're pushed out by people like this. They're intimidating, they're frightening, and there's just no excuse for that because it doesn't make better games, it doesn't make better programs. No one needs to know that you used a regular expression and some sort of crazy bit shifting to do that. No one cares. And what we need to do that is really focus on, in classrooms when male students begin to dominate the room, we need to focus on ways to diversify the networks. So if someone's really, really interested in computer science and they want to talk about it and they're really passionate, they have had 6 months of previous programming experience before stepping into your classroom, and it's an intro class, pull that person aside and say, hey, I really share your love of computer science. Maybe we can give some room for some other people to speak in the class, and maybe you can help me mentor and help other students grow. So the other thing is that code liberation really focuses on leaving no coder behind. We assume zero programming knowledge, and I think that that's really critical and something that's really overlooked in intro computer science classes. Because often, especially in the modern world, people come in with some understanding of how code should work or what code should be, and those people who do come in with any experience tend to really push out people who are new or just interested in the field. So I really believe that we really need to integrate and reintegrate the creative into the technical. Presenting programming outside the creative arts is a huge mistake. The other thing I want to say is I see programming as a political act. We're at the very naissance in the beginning of what will be a technological culture. The ideas that are getting inlaid right now are going to be the future of humanity. The structure that this form, this kind of culture is going to take is going to be the bedrock for the next 1,000 years. And for me, it's very important that minorities and women have a voice in crafting that structure. If they do not, that structure will be top-down, hierarchical, and less than optimal. Code can be open, ideas should benefit us all, and you can see this amplified in programmers like Rada Perlman, who programmed things like a tree structure that offer non-hierarchical approaches. And you see it in game controllers with people like Donna Bailey, who propose controllers like Centipede, right? Think about the Centipede controller versus the joystick. Okay, that's it for my political part of the talk. Now on to my games. If you want to talk more about politics, you can find me after this. So now I'm going to talk about experience, embodiment, and ecology. And these are the things that I consider the 3 E's of games. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. I grew up pretty much like you all did. Atari was my life. I loved video games. I found them to give me an incredible satisfaction. And all I wanted to do was play video games. I started playing online massive multiplayer games before they were called that. They were called MUDs. And I decided to be a programmer, and I wanted to make games. So this is the first computer I learned to program on. It's a VAX terminal, and it's a VT100. I can't even believe I'm showing this. And I worked very hard to learn to program, and I essentially developed a set of incredibly destructive practices that allowed me to forget and destroy my body. I was using these anachronistic interfaces that you don't even see any longer, things like a CRT screen, and keys that are like when you click on them. And what this ended up doing after hours and hours and hours was giving me an incredible disability, actually. I was actually partially disabled for a number of years, and I had to, I'm sorry, my voice is just sort of cracky today, and I had to rebuild myself from the floor. And that was a really intense experience. If you've ever had a doctor say that you may never work full-time again in the rest of your life, you may know that it's a really scary thing to stare down. So I decided to throw myself into my therapy. And that ended up being physical therapy, yoga, and essentially massage therapy for about 15 to 16 hours a week for 4 years solid. And I worked hundreds of hours to rebuild my body. And while I was doing that, I began to encounter emotions, and I began to encounter experiences in a brand new way. In my therapy, sometimes I would just find myself crying, and there would be no logical reason, like why on a Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. I would be crying. I wasn't sad about anything, nothing had happened, but I had encountered a physiological expression of emotion. And to me, I began to wonder, wow, is the body potentially the most interesting interface I've ever encountered, and maybe it's almost alien to me and I don't understand it. So then I began to look at how our emotions and ourselves were triggered by physical experience. So then I began to really look at the body as a technological material. And I began to see it as a material I wasn't familiar with. And for me, it was by far the most interesting intersection for tech. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of potential games and interactions that are lurking in our neurobiology in cross-modal interactions such as synesthesia and embodied cognition. And what I'm going to propose here is an anti-formalist approach to games. I am going to propose that everything in a game be adaptive and performative. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my music project that was made with Unity 3D in a game environment. It was called Black Swan. And it was my attempt to create a tech-free electronical music performance where my own body and the gestures of the cellist I played with created the entire visual and audio experience. The way we did this was using machine learning. I basically used supervised machine learning, so if any of you here are machine learning people, you can find me after this talk and I'll delve into how we did this. But I worked with a machine learning expert at Princeton called Rebecca Feebrink, and she has an open source tool called Wekinator that we're hopeful will be re-released for popular platforms like processing and open frameworks at some point in the next couple years. And I used that to essentially create a landscape that allowed me to use my body to create and generate sounds. So when I did this the first time, I tried tracking. So I was like, well, maybe if I stand here, I can have a sound play, right, like a trigger. But it actually didn't work very well because camera tracking is incredibly unreliable, if any of you here have used it. And also, it became very tuned to my body. I couldn't let somebody else with a different body shape use it. And I really wanted this kind of continuous control. And I believe that users should never be forced to conform their body to the affordances of an interface. So in my opinion, if using a games controller hurts your hands after 20 hours, it's trash and it needs to go away. So I want to talk a little bit about how machine learning works because it's probably a new idea to some of you guys and it's really sweet. And I think we're just beginning to see it come into games. So if you look at this, you'll see gesture 1, gesture 2, gesture 3. And if you want to track, you could have a computer using computer vision analyze that this is gesture 1, this is gesture 2, and this is 1, 2, and 3. But then if you're here, it doesn't know what to do, right? It has no idea because you've not written that code. If you use machine learning, it can kind of figure that out. So if you're a little bit off, it'll go, well, that's pretty close to 1, or maybe I'll give you something in between 1 and 2, and I will make that up based on the values of what I know 1 and 2 to be. And that gives you this incredibly organic system. So this is what a neural network looks like, if any of you here have ever seen it before. So basically, if I recorded myself using a camera with my arm up and with my arm down and maybe with my arms crossed and ducking or crawling, each one of those gestures I could associate with an input and an output, right? So hands up, turn up the volume. Hands down, turn down the volume. If I'm down on the floor, maybe trigger the pad sound in the synthesizer, right? And so if you program enough of these in, if you train the computer with enough kinds of possible movements and you give that enough possible kinds of outputs, what you begin to get is a very organic, alive, responsive system that when you walk across the stage is going to try and figure out what you would want to have happen, which is really different than having to write these discrete, continuous state machines. So I really believe that this brings in something really important. And I believe that creative applications and embodied interfaces can have what I call play. So has anyone here ever seen Sinewave's Auto Illustrator? One person. This is a joy. If none of you have ever seen this, I recommend Googling it. It's a piece of internet history that is quite delightful. This creative programmer decided to turn Illustrator into a generative, creative environment. So he basically embedded a lot of the kind of programs that we see in algorithmic computing, things like flocking or pathfinding or these tools that we see in games, he put those into Illustrator as drawing tools that artists could choose from. So you could do things like nodalize polygons, instant Bauhaus style, mutate into, and I just think that these were really interesting calls, and I made some of my most favorite art using this tool because it introduced a level of randomness that I had not seen before. And it was more like having a creative partner. And maybe some of you can recognize this, how to become an artist or become a great artist in just 10 seconds. I really thought this was a great project. Has anyone here played this? I hope some of you have. Good, good. It just sort of allows you to select through randomness a kind of image, and I find that very joyful. And the thing is if you use something like machine learning, you can get that kind of randomness or that kind of responsiveness. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I'm starting to look at emotion using the body, because I think that that's a really interesting thing I'm doing. And I'm essentially using all of my machine learning stuff to put people in these positions that are kind of known to trigger these emotions. So this is a game I made for children called Nightmare Kitty, and I made it in 2011, and it debuted at Maker Faire. I wanted children to be able to encounter fear and to then conquer it, because I believe that children have, I remember my own childhood, and I think we forget that childhood is a really scary experience, and it's full of all these things you don't really understand. So I had children duck down into this kind of crouching position to avoid these things that were attacking them from the sky, but then if the things got low enough, they could sit on them and quash them, and then they would stand up, and they would have this feeling of accomplishment. And I used a scientific idea called power posing to do that, and I'll get there in a second. And the reason this is all working, the science behind this, is that our emotions actually can be triggered completely physiologically. William James, back in 1888, discovered that emotion was actually caused as a result of your environment. So you essentially, your cognition kind of sees what's going on in your environment. It triggers your neurotransmitters. Your awareness shifts, and all of a sudden your heart rate spikes or you begin perspiring. Then afterwards, your kind of cognition picks up that you're afraid. It happens the other way. It's not like, oh, I see a bear, I am afraid. Your body senses a threat. It triggers all of your brain chemistry. It spikes your heart rate. It triggers cortisol. Then you become aware that you're afraid, which is a really different kind of approach to understanding emotion. And this cool paper came out, and it's called, and it presents this idea of power poses. And these are non-verbal displays that affect your neuroendocrine system. And the top poses create feelings of calm. They drop your cortisol levels. They change the structure of your actual brain chemistry and your awareness, and you become more relaxed and calm. The lower poses spike your cortisol levels and essentially begin to increase your heart rate, make you tense. So I used these poses in this game. So let's see. So basically, emotions can be triggered, I was thinking about, in response to an ecology. So why don't I begin to create ecologies? So this is a project that I began working on 2 years ago called Night Games. Night Games was my attempt to continue to work with children and continue to give them empowered agency in these settings. And I wanted to give them a chance to kind of play together using music and sound and nonverbal expression. So I worked with, thankfully I was working in the same space that Joust was made in, so there were all these PlayStation Move controllers laying around that I could just harness with a pack of cheap free sensors. So I used them not because I was interested in using the PlayStation Move, but because there was cheap tech in it that I could use for free. And it has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, an LED, a temperature sensor, and all these great things you can leverage, right? Pack of buttons. So I took a bunch of sounds and then I kind of layered them into this controller with different gestures and different ways of moving. So maybe if you shake it really hard, it does one thing, then if you shake it really soft, it does another, and then I just gave these to children. And that went pretty well. They enjoyed it. My favorite was actually, I'm going to play a video for you if I can here. Where's my mouse? Oh, I hate it when Keynote does this. Let's see if I just hit spacebar. Can I get some sound? I'm good? Okay, so this is, let me go back a bit. So then one of my favorite videos is a drum corps came and was playing it, and they formed a drum circle and just went for it. So it sounds like this. So I knew I had a really good interaction when this kind of thing started happening, so I wanted to continue to work on it. From there I began thinking about like how to build a world around this experience, how to make this something that went beyond just like a sonic world. And I had been working a lot with these like ecological games. This was the very first video game I ever made. I actually made it 12 years ago here in this city. I went back today to the place where I created it, got all emotional. This is a game about bees that play in a collective ecology to survive. I then turned it into a field game that I played at Come Out and Play, and I worked with a computational biologist to use a pack of generative rules to allow the rules to generate patterns in the game. So that was a really exciting project. You guys can check it out here. And one of the things that I did is I gave the bees agency. I said, every round you can choose to follow the rules or not. It's totally up to you. And the players can tell you to do something, but you're a free agent. So one of my favorite responses was one of my players decided to have an obsessive compulsive disorder. So the players would tell him to go pick up pollen, and he had to put the pollen in a straight line first at only 90-degree angles. This infuriated the players. It was kind of fantastic. So then I really wanted to start approaching games as possibly these like ecologies I could begin to play with versus these games that have economy systems. And I wanted to really start looking at games as possibility spaces where the rules are actually created in a response to the play and in a response to the world. And I wanted an ecological approach to play that allowed systems to learn to adapt. So now I'm transitioning my machine learning platform from supervised to unsupervised. I just want my camera to track my players and figure out by watching them with the tools or props I give them what kinds of rules they're making up, and then I want to empower my game to be adaptive around that. So I want to allow players to evolve the rules as the play experience unfolds. And through that, I want to create an empowered, agency-driven environment. Because I believe experience, embodiment, and an ecology can equal empowerment and agency. And in a world where we're seeing our experiences of agency limited through ongoing commercialization, I believe that giving people a sense of control and responsiveness is incredibly important. And before I leave this, I'm going to say, I believe that limited systems train people to think in limited ways. So this is my first beta draft of what Night Games is. It's still evolving. You guys probably have seen it here. I learned a very powerful lesson about humidity and bare conductive paint. It works in the morning, not so good by the evening. So this is an example of me doing it with pitch. I built a sculpture about 2 months ago in Amsterdam, and I'll play it for you if I can. The best is like it's one oscillator right now. So anyway, that's changing. It was changing the pitch as people shine lights on it. So the more people that would shine on the sculpture, the higher the pitch would go. So this project has been ongoing, and this is, I don't know if you can see it very well, but maybe. But this is the 3D world that I've been building that's infused with all these new sensors. You can see it outside at Amaze right now. Kind of looks like this. And we made 2 of the stars so people can play those using light. And we wanted to make the tree and the hut all very touchable and organic so people could use them to craft music together. Another crazy idea I was thinking about was how we could have the notes mapped to the physical space. So the higher the interaction, the higher the pitch. So for example, the stars would have a very high-pitched sound, whereas like the rocks would have a very low-pitched sound. We began to build it here in Amaze, which was something that was maybe perhaps not the smartest move, but really, really fun. So we've been building it over the period of about 4 or 5 months, and we decided to construct it for the first time here over the last week. And we wanted to have clouds that you could sing with, huts, that you could touch with other people and make music with. I think our ultimate audience for this is going to obviously be children's museums. These are kind of the clouds in progress. You guys, if you've gone inside the hut, you've seen the sensor design. And it's kind of been coming along. I think this is the only reason I show this is in case anyone's working with 3D printed technology and wants to make game controllers. I wanted to kind of shout out that magnets are a really cool trick to enclose 3D forms. So those little round holes there are for earth magnets, and then that opens slots for all the components. So you can slot the components in and then close up the rock. So that's what that looked like in progress, and that's what those look like when I finished them and closed them up. They're pretty stable. So that's what they look like when they kind of flash and glow. Some of you have seen them. And we made this tree. We wanted to make it so people could hug the tree together and get different sounds. We thought that would be really lovely. So anyway, that is my talk. I want to mention that I work with Adele Lynn, and she's my creative partner in this project. And without her, this would not have been even remotely possible. Also, Lucas, and I'm going to try it, Scaramuncino, Scaramuncino. I tried it twice, but he helped in at the last moment, helped us paint a bunch of sensors and build a bunch of things. And also Thorsten went and helped us build this crazy sculpture that I've been working on. So that's my current project. Wish me luck, because unsupervised learning is not the easiest task. So we'll see how it goes. And this is me if you want to find me in the real world. So awesome.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if we have time for questions. I think no. We're on a tight schedule today. One? Is it one question? Okay, you have to come up here to the stage if you want to ask a question. One person, anywhere. Is there a hand? No. Anyway, counting down from 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much.